Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Russell Nohelty and Renzo Podesta's graphic novel, Ichabod Jones, Monster Hunter. Now, I really like the first volume of this graphic novel. I think the first volume is a masterclass in creating an unreliable narrator. Because we have this guy, Ichabod Jones, who is in a mental institution. He believes that he is a monster hunter, and he hears this voice telling him to kill monsters. But we're not sure, because on the one hand, we have Ichabod and the voice in his head, which is presented via these little black dialogue bubbles. So, for instance, we have a series of panels here where it says these other two guys who are orderlies or whatever in this mental institution show up, and they start attacking this monster that he sees. And the voice says, over the course of several panels, "Don't listen to them. They tried to kill you. You always have a choice. Their bullets are useless. They are wicked. Only you can defeat it. Because, Ichabod, you are an instrument of God." So, we have that element of things. But at the same time, we have Ichabod's psychiatrist, who asserts that all of the stuff that Ichabod is experiencing, the idea that he's a monster hunter, all of the violence, because he is in this institution because he's murdered a number of people, etc., etc. The psychiatrist's assertion is that he is essentially a paranoid schizophrenic with delusions, and out of his psychosis, he has murdered a bunch of people thinking that they were monsters. So the first volume of this book is really fascinating because we jump back and forth between Ichabod's perception of himself as the monster hunter, along with the voice telling him that that's the truth, versus the psychiatrist and this sort of external, real-seeming world in which Ichabod is mentally ill and having these psychotic episodes. And we don't get a clear conception of which one is the truth throughout the first portion of this graphic novel. And I think that's amazing. I think it's amazingly well crafted because it's so much about the difficulty of distinguishing reality from fantasy, or the difficulty of distinguishing reality from delusion. And that's really interesting. Nohelty and Podesta have done a very good job creating that uncertainty. And it's an interesting thing that drives the plot forward. What we get at the end, so initially, toward the end of the first volume, Ichabod, along with a number of the other mental patients, essentially escape. There's a monster that comes and destroys part of the hospital. They escape. And then we finally get something that is more or less unambiguous confirmation that Ichabod is right. We get this final panel of the first volume where the mental patients have gone out into the world and the world is basically apocalyptic. So in that instance, we have external confirmation from a number of different people that what Ichabod is experiencing is real rather than delusions. And I actually find that a little bit of a letdown. Then in the second volume, the second issue, Ichabod and his friends basically end up in this town where they get sort of captured by some survivors of the apocalypse who are fighting zombies. And Ichabod is forced to go try and destroy this group of zombies, etc., etc. And he ends up getting shot at the end. Spoiler alert, I guess. But he ends up getting shot, and the second volume, the end of this graphic novel, just sort of ends up with him dying, which is, I don't know, again, a bit of a letdown. I think Nohelty and Podesta are not great at endings. At least in my opinion, they're not. It's an interesting graphic novel, and I definitely like it. I wish, the thing that I really wish that this had done was draw the ambiguity throughout the entire graphic novel of whether or not this was reality that Ichabod was experiencing, or whether this was delusions. I think that would have been amazing if that uncertainty were never resolved.